In each of our lives, we face choices, and all we can do is make the best decision at the time, no matter the consequences.
Well, sometimes those decisions can haunt us, but a decorated Spokane veteran got the chance most of us never get to go back and correct the most difficult choice he's ever made. KXLY4's Nadine Woodward is here with that story.
Yeah, well, Robin and Dave, you know, like many of our brothers, our fathers, our neighbors and friends, Jerry Dellwo answered the call to duty in the 1960s. He shipped off to Vietnam. He was a trained medic sent to save lives. But it's the life he couldn't save that 41 years later he still cannot forget. And now he is getting a second chance, a chance to fulfill the promise to leave no man behind.
Every day, with every step, Jerry Dellwo walks his route, delivering the mail in North Spokane like he has for 20 years. The people in this neighborhood have no idea where he's walked before, or that every step takes him farther from the life he left behind.
Have you ever wished that you got a phone call from somebody that gave you an important assignment and then whisked you off to some far-off land just to break the boredom? I did. I got that phone call.
This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
The call took him back to May 1969. Gas was 35 cents a gallon. Richard Nixon was president, and the Fifth Dimension dominated the music charts. Dellwo was a 22-year-old Green Beret who had just arrived in Vietnam. This cocky kid from Spokane was about to experience firsthand the horrors of war.
This is the camp that we came to defend.
Benhet Camp was under siege.
We were assaulting a hill. We were trying to position ourselves on top of a hill. Sergeant Montes was the commanding officer of one of the 3 companies in our battalion.
Dellwo hadn't met Sergeant Anastasio Montes until that day, and by nightfall they found themselves in the fight for their lives.
He suffered a bullet wound through his jaw, and he was losing quite a bit of blood.
6 in the unit were gravely injured. The rest went to get help. As the medic, Dellwo stayed behind to lead the wounded, desperately trying to stay ahead of the North Vietnamese for now.
Down to 1 weapon and 2 magazines of ammunition is all I had.
Sergeant Montes was struggling with each step. Approaching footsteps warned the end might be near.
Then all of a sudden, the footsteps stopped.
Out of the jungle emerged a man who would save countless lives in Vietnam, an Australian soldier named Keith Payne. He was out looking for indigenous tribesmen, but found a trail to these wounded soldiers instead. Payne began to lead them to safety, but Sergeant Montes could not go on.
He'd fallen back against my shoulder, and my arm was bare, and I noticed just a tapping on the tips of my finger. And I realized that that was blood dripping off the end of my fingers. And that's how I knew, because it was pitch black, we couldn't see anything. That's how I realized that he's bleeding enough that I feel it on my fingertips, and he was getting weaker as we went. That's when I said, we're not going to move any further.
They called for a helicopter to carry him out, trying to comfort Montes, who they knew by then would not survive.
After spending 7 hours with him that night, we had become like brothers. And Montes actually died in my arms.
Then, the gut-wrenching decision. The surviving men had to push on and leave Montes behind. Dellwo had every intention of going back, but the next day, he was hit by mortar fire and spent 6 weeks in a Tokyo hospital. The area where Montes died was bombed by American forces, then hit with napalm. But Dellwo always believed Montes was still out there, somewhere.
They had believed that the body had been destroyed by one of these big 500-pound bombs. I was never convinced of that. I've been wanting to get back there ever since.
He would get that chance, though he would have to wait 41 years. This spring, Dellwo got the call that shook him from his boredom. After all these years, could he find Sergeant Montes?
In my mind's eye, I feel like I could just walk there.
In Vietnam, he met his search team, including one man already adept at finding lost American soldiers.
I was the medic there, and the Australian, Keith Payne, was the commanding officer, and he would be the one that would be able to find his way back to the body better than anybody.
The landscape looked nothing like it did in 1969, but Payne and Dellwo narrowed the search to an area 1/6 the size of a football field. But after 2 days of searching, they came up empty. No Montes, no clues, but no quitting for these soldiers.
There was Mountaineer tribes people that were with us, and I'm connected with one of them, and he's going to try to find some of those that were with us, and tribes people are quite good at finding their way.
Until the next call, Dellwo has his pictures and memories of that night. He also has a silver star and a purple heart, and a relentless mission, unfinished, half a world away. And it goes far beyond Sergeant Montes.
I would like to go back just to get involved with the tribes people in the Kon Tum province, those are the people I worked with when I was there.
When he retires from the Postal Service, Dellwo wants to work as a medic in peacetime Vietnam and hopefully find Sergeant Montes while he's there. Until then, more steps, each one leading back to Vietnam.
The organization that brought Dellwo back to Vietnam may invite him back a second time. It all depends on what level of certainty there is that they would be able to find Montes. If they can narrow it down enough, they could order a full anthropological dig.
And Nadine, this organization's been pretty successful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. Dave, it's called a JPAC. It was formed back in 2003, and last year alone the group identified about 100 previously unaccounted for servicemen, though their mission is, of course, far from complete.
Great story.
Thanks, Nadine.